pork and seafood in Canada. What did you get out of this?
Well, thank you. Sorry, I'll let you finish, but yeah.
Well, it seems Mark Carney has a real issue being called out on his lack of productivity. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Mark Carney was in front of his pet reporters today, and they were asking him questions that I feel they were hoping to be able to tell their audience all of these wonderful and flowery things, except for, of course, Mark Carney doesn't have any straight answers. So when pressed by these reporters, or when they dig a little deeper to try to get to the bottom line, he becomes very condescending, very arrogant, exceedingly rude. And then wants you to believe that he's got everything all in hand because it's all just some part of his master personality plan. He desperately wishes that the Canadians saw him with the same light that the Americans see Donald Trump. In fact, most of us do not. And only those that are holding on desperately to some fantasy that he's going to be able to put Donald Trump in his place are still actually in full support of Mark Carney. We're going to take a close look at some of the things that were said in this press conference and how Mark Carney's body language and behavior indicate that he not only is not in control of the situation, but does not have the ability to withstand any scrutiny when he's in that place. Before I get into that, though, I want to encourage all of you to double check that you're still subscribed. And if you're not subscribed, to subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with your socials. Let's get into this. Well, Mark Carney's media that travels around with him on the taxpayer-funded jumbo jet probably has to feed them as well. He had questions from them about the apology that Donald Trump insists Mark Carney delivered on behalf or in the name of Doug Ford.
Hi, Prime Minister. Mackenzie Gray with Global News. Did you apologize to Donald Trump about Ontario's anti-tariff ad?
I did. I did apologize to the president. President was offended by the act, or by the ad, rather. And it's not something I would have done, which is to put in place that advertisement. And so I apologized to him. I'm the one, in English, I'm the one who is responsible in my role as Prime Minister for the relationship with the President of the United States. And the federal government is responsible for the foreign relationship with the U.S. government.
We can agree. You are the one that is responsible for the relationship with the U.S. government. You are also the one that is responsible for your relationship in safeguarding the reputation of the Premier of Ontario. You are further the one who could have convinced us more that you had the right to apologize if you were the one that was taking responsibility for running the ad. You don't have the right to apologize for something you didn't do, bud. Let's leave aside this childishness of how you're going to apologize for something that Doug Ford is unequivocally not apologizing for. Let's leave aside the fact that Doug Ford was able to derail these trade negotiations that you yourself claim you're responsible for. You are responsible for, not Doug Ford, not Danielle Smith, not David Eby. Mark Carney's government has been unable to solve these trade negotiations. That's one thing. But the other thing, of course, is that the relationship between Mark Carney and Donald Trump is so fragile that one action by the Premier of Ontario could derail the entire talks, did in fact derail the talks. And we don't see Mark Carney being able to repair those talks. I mean, they spent a week shadowing one another through the same countries, interacting with one another at many of the same functions. And yet Mark Carney didn't have the diplomatic skill or the interpersonal skill or the business skill or the deal-making skill to get Donald Trump to walk back from the precipice. So we sit here now telling ourselves that we elected the wrong individual because he was the guy that claimed that he was going to be able to solve this problem. And now he's not the one that's going to be able to solve this problem. And we needed the other guy who was going to be able to solve our domestic economic problems. Mark Carney's solution is to take all of our raw resources and send them to other countries. Instead of it being the United States, we're going to send them to China now and throw all of our own jobs and all of the possibility of getting our own prosperity up and running and developing our own industry away so that Mark Carney can virtue signal to the world that he's somehow green. But really, it's because all of his investments are in China. What ones are not in the United States. And so you are correct, or at least we can agree, Mark Carney, you are the one that is responsible for the degradation, the deterioration of the relationship between Canada and the United States, one of the strongest and oldest relationships in modern times. In addition to the fact that this is the same man who's making deals with people who are, let's be straightforward, ideologically opposed to everything that he stands for, and yet he's still able to hammer out a deal with them. You have no excuses, Mr. Carney. It's not Doug Ford's fault, it's your fault. Doug Ford's actions were not a good idea, and I've covered that. The fact that Doug Ford was able to derail the negotiations between you and Donald Trump speaks more about you than it does about anything. Here we can see a man that has no answer. One of the clues is the fact that he picks up the pen and puts the pen down.
Does this show that there is division within Team Canada?
Right. His hands behind his back. He understands where the question is going, puts a little quick frown on his face, then reaches for that pen.
That the premiers don't trust you to negotiate?
I think there is,
Then immediately puts the pen down.
well, the individuals can speak for themselves, and they're practiced in speaking to themselves, and they will speak for themselves. There are other premiers who have different view in terms of the utility of those ads, and you can speak to them.
Come on. Come on. This is a guy who has no way at all to answer that question, and his body language speaks volumes. Well, you can talk to other people. They can speak for themselves, and if you want, you can ask those guys, and, they can speak for them. Everybody's well good at speaking. No clue. The reality on the ground is Mark Carney doesn't care what our premiers say and do. He has no idea what he's doing, guys. That's the thing you have to understand, or at least he doesn't know how to run a country. He doesn't know how to bring prosperity to the people. He might know how to do things that are, not necessarily in our best interests, but he certainly has no idea how to solve the political issues that are plaguing this country. So I would say that, though I'd never put much stock in that whole Team Canada rah-rah, sis-boom-bah stuff that I heard coming out of the premiers, who are the single largest protectionists in the entire Western Hemisphere, I will say that Mark Carney's body language not only indicates that he has nowhere to hide when the lights are on him, but that he is desperate to not talk about it. Here we can see an example of how the green-minded agenda of Mark Carney is getting in the way, and he has to get out of the way.
Has issues if they produce any of the following: steel, aluminum, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, forest products, with 232, so-called 232 tariffs in the United States.
He's claiming that any country that operates with steel, and you heard the list, has a problem with the 232 tariffs, and that Donald Trump is making adjustments to the entire ecosystem of the world. You know what he didn't say? He didn't say oil. You'll note that he did not say oil or natural gas or coal or diamonds or copper. He didn't say any of that stuff. Things that this country has an enormous abundance. So really what you're saying to me, Mr. Carney, is that you're intentionally ignoring, in the name of your green agenda, the things that will absolutely be not impacted by the 232 tariffs. And you're focusing and drilling down on the things that in fact will be impacted by the 232 tariffs. In fact, ignoring the fact that by amplifying the things that are not impacted by the 232 tariffs, we would in fact help our entire domestic supply of the things that are impacted: the wood, the lumber and the metal. And all we have to do is get somebody in the driver's seat that knows what they are doing and has a vision about what makes Canada best. What's best for Canada, not for China, not for Malaysia, not for Indonesia, not for any of them. No offense to those places, but we have to think about ourselves now. And I don't hear any of that coming out of Mark Carney. And in fact, he just said to you right there that all of these countries were in it together because they all have these same problems. So there's a lot of countries out there with problems on the products that you're talking about. And yet oil and natural gas and shipping and all of the critical minerals, no problems at all. So would it not be wiser for Canada to sort of shift a little bit to the ones that we know are going to make a lot of money, and then we can utilize that money and that infrastructure to revitalize the industries that we're already talking about? But that doesn't seem to be the case, because really what he's trying to do is terrify you into thinking that if you don't vote for him, somehow there's going to be a problem with the economy. And yet here we sit, a country that did vote for him, with an enormous problem in our economy.
If you cast your mind back to April during the election campaign, I know it feels like a long time ago for me, you told Canadians that China was the biggest security threat to this country and to Canadians. Do you still believe that to be the case?
I think we have to manage all our threats. There are a number of threats from a country mentioned, Russia. We've non-state actor threats, which are material. I guess, one of the advantages of having your security clearance is you're better informed about some of the threats, and I highly recommend that anyone either in the position of responsibility or seeking it has their security clearance. So I have a richer sense of the tapestries of threats that face our country.
Are we back to this now? Are you somehow going to see what we saw here, ladies and gentlemen, is a classic deflection. He didn't answer the question. Do you still think China is a threat? That was the question. And then he went through the list of usual suspects. First, he talked about Russia. Then he talked about national industries, threats. So I guess that's terrorist groups and the like, different groups that have been put on terrorist watch lists and so on and so forth, with the different things that come across our border and all of that. And then the desperate of all desperation that they've been trying to do for years now. Pierre Poilievre doesn't have a security clearance. So, that means that I recommend that he get a security clearance, but you didn't answer the question, bud. We're talking about China. Do you still think China is a threat? Because that's what you've been saying for months now. That's what you said on the campaign trail. That's how you secured much of the vote in some parts of Toronto, by saying that China was the threat, because those people live in fear of China, even though they don't live in China. And so you secured a lot of Vancouver votes, and you secured a lot of Toronto votes by trying to put China over there on the they're a bad fellas, bad players list, that we can't necessarily trust them. And then when you're asked about it, you're like, well, it could be Russia, or there might be other non-nation threats. And, did you know that Pierre Poilievre still doesn't have a security clearance? So, well, let me ask you this, Mr. Carney. First of all, on the security clearance of Pierre Poilievre, show me one example of when he needed it. Just show me one. Show me one example of when it was imperative that Pierre Poilievre have a security clearance as leader of the opposition. And you will find that there is none, not even one. But you could use it to mute him. You could use it to censor him. You could use it to silence him if he had it. He doesn't have it, and now you can't silence him. He doesn't have it, and now you need to answer the question about your position on China. He didn't answer the question. I'll leave a link to the press conference, no problem at all. However, he did not answer the question. He just tried this deflection. First it was Putin, then it was Poilievre, and anybody else in the middle, but at no point did he give a definitive statement on his position on whether or not China is still a threat. And we can take from that, ladies and gentlemen, that he knows China is a threat, but he's just terrified to say it. Okay, I need you to pay attention in this last clip, because Mark Carney tips his hand. There's a lot of tells in this for anybody who knows what they're looking at. Because I've always told you from the very beginning of my talks about Mark Carney believes that he's smarter than you. And because he believes that he's smarter than you, his personality is such that he thinks because he's smarter than you, he's better than you. Now, if I were Jordan Peterson, I'm sure I would know what that means in a psychological sense. All I know is the lifetime of accumulating the understanding of the personality. I have rubbed shoulders with many people like this who think their intellectual superiority, like they tie their worth to it. And then it slips over into arrogance. It slips over into superiority. It goes to your head, technically. Now, the pun is, intended, I suppose. But I want you to look at a couple of things. First, he interrupts the reporter because in his mind, he believes that he knows where the reporter's going with the question. Of course, that's very arrogant. You can't read minds, but if you can read minds, you're in the wrong line of work. Then he begins to fidget with the pens. And then he begins to talk in a condescending tone, talk right down to you, try to explain to you what is very obvious to the, he wants to make it seem like he knows things that you don't. So I just need you to sort of pay attention to this because it is a serious flag, to use modern vernacular.
When you were talking to us about your meeting with President Xi, you said that this would be good for Canadian workers and their families. And so for the people who are producing canola and pork
Yeah.
and seafood in Canada, what did you get out of this?
Well, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'll let you finish, but yeah. So what we got is was not going to happen prior to this meeting was there was going to be any movement on the trade restrictions in those areas or in other areas, or in even things such as I mentioned in my remarks, people-to-people exchange or tourism. You know, Canada is not a destination for China. I mean, we're in a bucket of 3 or 4 countries alongside North Korea and I think South Sudan. Maybe I'm missing the 4th, unfortunately, but trust me, there's 4. And so not having those areas, what this does, what the meeting accomplished, which was the objective of the meeting, was to establish that relationship at the highest level for the first time in 8 years, and to unlock few things. One is shorter term, very important shorter term issues. You mentioned canola, same with the fishing industry. Those are important issues for us. And the instruction of officials and ministers to work on both sides to find resolution for those is something that comes out of that meeting at that level in that system, okay? Don't have the meeting, don't have the understanding of where the relationship is going to go, there would not be progress on those issues, okay? People sometimes simplify it down and to give this for that. That's not the way it works.
It is exactly the way it works. They have a word for it. It's called trade. You give me this, I will give you that. It's a trade. But what he said was exactly what he's been saying about Donald Trump. Well, we're going to get the other guys to start to talk to one another. And then maybe, you don't get it. So because you don't get it, I'm just going to be offended that you even put me on the spot up here. I know that there are millions of Canadians right now, hundreds of thousands of Canadians are out of work, and that's impacting millions of Canadians. But I don't want you to dare put me on the spot how I claimed there was going to be a lot of progress with China, and all I really got was a promise to get a meeting in a few months. I know that Donald Trump was able to resolve the soybean issue problem that he's having with China, and he wasn't even in the room with the Chinese leader. But you were in the room with the guy and you weren't able to resolve any of it. Of course, he wants to try to convince the reporter, and through the reporter you, that it's just beyond your understanding, right? You don't get how these things work, don't you know? Mister, I've never been a politician in my entire life, and all I really do is corporate raid. I'm not really somebody who started a business from the ground up and then became a self-made billionaire, like in the example of, say, Donald Trump. So now I get that there's some, he might have had money. That doesn't matter. He claimed bankruptcy and he got it all back, and now he owns properties all around the world, and he's able to resolve issues all around the world, and he's able to make deals with people all around the world. And our leader can't even make a deal with him. Never mind not make a deal with Donald Trump, not make a deal with China. Of course, that indicates to me that he can't make a deal, that he's not the right guy for the job, because there are things we could be doing as a nation that would offset the destruction of these jobs, that would offset the economic impact of the decisions of the Liberal government. Of course, it would mean that much of the Liberal government policies would have to go away, just like you see Donald Trump doing. Donald Trump has removed a lot of the Democratic policies, and now his country is thriving. Now his people are working. Now his wealth of his nation is skyrocketing to heretofore unheard of levels. The stock market hasn't gone, I think it's gone down 1 or 2 times. But every time I turn around, it's green. And every time I turn around, it's near a new record. And so same holds true now for the Japanese stock market, because they see where the business is going. They understand what's expected of them. Now they've had the time to move all of these companies. Many of the jobs that are leaving Canada are one thing, but what's getting overlooked is the amount of businesses that are leaving Canada, that are going down into the United States, because that's where the market is. And it's going to just be simpler for them to source the material inside of the United States of America and sell into the market, because the market in America is thriving, whereas the market in Canada is bombing. Now, Donald Trump was able to solve the deal with China. Mark Carney was not able to resolve the issues with China. And now he wants to tell you that it's not because he doesn't know what he's doing. It's because you just simply don't get it, right? You think it's as simple as this, but really it isn't, okay? Like, you heard the tone in his voice. You heard him interrupt the reporter because he can't get a deal and he knows it. And everything else that you heard is just him trying to mask the fact that he cannot get a deal. It's simply trying to mask the fact that he is not the man he claims to be. And therefore, what we need is somebody that's going to focus on our needs immediately, not on these grandiose globalist agenda needs, but on the nationalist agenda. We need to focus on the nationalist agenda. We need to set aside and forget all about the rest of it. We just need to focus on what we can do to help ourselves. And then you will find issues with China will resolve themselves. And I understand that we might have to bail out the farmers and buy the canola ourselves and put it in a gigantic stockpile. So what? So be it. Those are some of the most resilient farmers in the face of the earth. We'll cover their losses. I mean, Carney has no problem throwing money away on Ukraine, so I'm sure we can help out our farmers. And then they can plant something that will go to a different market and everything will be hunky-dory, tickety-boo. Of course, that would mean that Mark Carney would have to acknowledge the fact that he cannot solve the problems. That would mean that Mark Carney would have to focus on doing something domestically. And of course, we know he's not going to be able to do that. We know that the Liberal government is too far wrapped up in their ideologies, their globalist agenda and their green agenda, and all these agendas that are all over the world crumbling, all over the world falling to pieces. The first thing that Donald Trump did was remove the green agenda. Everybody seems to forget that. Long before he implemented the tariffs, he stopped the green agenda. It was like day one, January 20th. He's like, no more green agenda. It wasn't until March or April that he implemented the tariffs. He did a few steps in the middle because he understands what's got to be happening. What's the groundwork has to be laid. And I see it clear as a bell, and there are people on the conservative side of the aisle that understand what needs to happen. The only thing that's in the way, the only thing that's interfering from us rebounding quicker, from us recovering from this mess, is 9 pieces of legislation that were drafted by the Liberal government in an effort to control the productivity of the products that we have in this country, that we can manufacture and that we can develop, that will bring prosperity to our people, that will bring prosperity to anybody who feels that they're a Canadian first, that they are putting themselves in Canada, not the rest of the world. Never mind what the globalists are looking for. The globalists, you should know by now that whatever the globalists are looking for is going to cost you everything. It's going to cost you all of your freedom. It's going to cost you all of your choice. It's going to cost you you're going to have to tighten up your belt is the current one. You're going to have to make more sacrifices is what Mark Carney, who's a globalist, is trying to convince everybody of now. Now you're out there and you're under 35. Haven't you suffered enough? Haven't you sacrificed enough? Have you sacrificed anything that has gotten you a payout as yet? Have you given up and waited for anything that has come your way? And so ask yourself, why would this time be any different? What we need to do is put shovels in the ground. We need to get these 9 laws out of the way. We need to get the green agenda out of the way. We need to get the liberals and their fanaticism out of the way. And then we will have prosperity. Then we will have hope. Then we will have a future. That's just my opinion. You can leave me your opinion down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.